We are almost ready to start the first layer of paint on our practice landscape watercolor painting. I have decided to add a couple of little shapes in the sky because I feel like this is too much space. I'm going to add very, very lightly in pencil, just a couple of shapes for clouds. Not making popcorn clouds, making a little bit more of a triangular shape. Now I'm going to start with a wet and wet wash. Remember that's one of the techniques we did, wet and wet wash. I'm going to be using blues, mostly just blues. So I'm going to start by making sure my brush is clean, adding a couple of drops of water to the top of the blue to soften it up. And then I'm going to load some blue onto my brush. Notice I cleaned out the lid of my watercolor palette. So I'm going to put some dark blue. Now I can water this down a little bit. And now I'm going to wash my brush completely. And I'm going to start the wet and wet technique for the sky. Starting with some clean water. Going to go around the clouds, and I'm going to go across the top of the mountain. I'm just pushing the water around so that it completely covers everything except the clouds, and I'm being careful to not go on top of the mountains. So I'm pushing the water around so I don't have any big standing water puddles. And I'm only going to do it halfway. I'm not leaving a straight line though. I'm leaving kind of a rough line of clear water. Then I'm going to take some of the blue and I'm going to just go ahead and start adding some dots of blue. I don't want it to be dark. This first layer should be pretty light. You can always go back and add some blue, make it darker later. So right now we're just doing a wash. This is called a wash. And it's just the first phase to our landscape painting. So I'm keeping it really light. And if it's a little bit streaky, that's okay, because the sky is streaky sometimes. All right, so I'm almost halfway across the sky, and I'm gonna wash the brush out and just add some layers of water to the other side. It's okay if they overlap this time. Just push the water around in the sky. And same thing, I'm gonna go in, get some blue, and just add a top layer of blue along tops of the mountains, along the border, and along my clouds. I don't have enough blue. Okay, and I'm gonna let that dry for just a little while, and then I can go back and add something to it later. Okay, so there's the sky. Now I'm gonna jump down to, I'm gonna skip the mountains for now because I need to let the sky dry. So I'm gonna go down to the water, and I'm gonna use the wet and wet technique again. Now, here's a little trick about trying to make your water look more glistening and sparkly. When you are applying the layer of water, don't cover the whole thing. So leave a couple of dry spots. because you're going to let the watercolor not completely cover this. So we're going to leave some dry spots. I think I'm going to use some blue, and I think I'm going to put, I'm going to put a little bit of violet and some mixtures of both. All right, so I'm going to get some blue. And you'll notice that this isn't going to go everywhere because I did leave some dry spots. And my paper's drying up already, so I'm just adding a little bit more water so that everything can bleed into each other the way I'm hoping that it will. And I'm letting some sections stay white. I'm hoping that some sections can stay white. And while that's drying, I'm going to use a flat wash for these blades of grass or bushes. So again, I'm washing my brush, and I'm going to moisten the green and the black. I'm not going to use much black, but I want it to be ready. So I'm going to put some black on my palette, wash my brush out really well before I get the green. And I'm going to put some green in my palette. Wash my brush out. Okay, so this part's a little trickier. Luckily, you have a nice thin, pointy brush, so this shouldn't be, you should be able to have some pretty good control. Okay, so with a very light touch, I'm gonna roll my brush around so it's pointy on the tip. With a very light touch, I'm just gonna do a little bit of a stripe with the green. I'm going out of the border a little bit because I didn't put any tape on. If you have some tape and you can tape your border, that won't happen. And when you do your final draft, you should consider that. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of black with green so I can make a dark value of green, a shade this is called. And next to the section that I just painted, I'm going to go in and add, so this is just a flat wash, so I'm wanting these colors to bleed into each other. So again, with a very light touch, I'm just pushing this shade of green, which is a green and black mixture. This is just going to give my blades of grass some depth and texture. I'm working kind of fast because I don't want everything to dry before it has a chance to mix together and bleed together. So you want to kind of move quickly when you're doing these kind of washes. Okay, I'll leave that alone. I'm going to do the same thing for my blades of grass over here on the other side. Washed my brush out really well. And I'm going to make sure I have enough green, so I might just put a little more green in my palette. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with roll my brush so it's pointy on the tip and a very light touch so I can keep nice good control. Just going to do one stripe of green. Wash the brush. Didn't really have to wash the brush. Again, I'm going to take a little dot of the black, mix it with the green so I get a dark value of green. I'm going to go in right next to that and make sure those colors overlap so they can bleed into each other. and wash the brush. Now we really have to let this sit and dry for a little bit before we start adding some of the other sections, because we don't want all the colors to bleed into each other.